Our piece is brought to you in part by Seat Giant. Stop paying U.S. dollars for games and concerts. Canadian-owned and operated with Canadians in mind. Super Bowl, college football, Taylor Swift, Justin Timberlake. They've got it all. Use promo code RPShow for 15% off now. Check us out at seatgiant.ca. 12 games in the show tonight, including the Seattle Kraken at the St. Louis Blues, as we mentioned. Mike Benton will host it on the Kraken Audio Network, and he joins us today. Our good friend Mike Benton on the mic. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, Rod. Hey, can you take me back here to that opening screen with palm trees and sunshine? I mean, it's wet and sloppy outside right now, and we can use as much as we can get right now.
Washington in February is lovely. Washington State, that is. Hey, Mike, it's good to see you, brother. Glad to have you. I see you're rocking a Mariners hat. What's the outlook for the M's here in 2025 with spring training going down?
Well, actually, the alternate Kraken logo right on top here.
Okay.
That close. But, I mean,
very confusing.
Talk a little bit about that here, if you don't mind. I mean, I cover them when I get done here with hockey season as well for a few months. I mean, I had a couple chances filling in for our good friend of these airwaves, TV host Ian Furness. He's on air 1 to 3 on our airwaves as well. And about a couple of weeks ago, we kept bringing this up and over when the Mariners kept missing on key free agents, Kyle Tucker, being dealt as well. It's so funny because we just addressed this topic ad nauseum here in this market, but it's crazy what this organization does sometimes where we look at their lineup and, yeah, you don't want to rock the boat too much in the state that they're in, but you just figure 1 to 2 more big bats in this lineup could put them over the top, put them in the playoffs. And do you want to face that Mariner pitching staff in a 5-game series, in a 7-game series, and get a handful of, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Brian Wu? Brian Wu carved up the Dodgers when he faced them at Dodger Stadium this last August. It's scary to think what this team can do if they get into the postseason because that pitching staff is so good. They are good enough to mess around and maybe get into a World Series. And who knows what happens from there based on where your pitching lines up as well. But, for whatever reason, they have this seemingly self-imposed cap of what they want to spend on hitting. And it's caused a whole mound of frustration. So, there's the ultimate hope that with this baseball team that just, grips this area and this region year after year after year, that they can find a way to figure it out and, push 90 wins or more and then get in. But ultimately, the frustration is don't just get in, but set yourself up to make a serious run at this like the Seahawks did about roughly 10 years ago. So a lot of hope that they can finally get to there and start pushing more forward here.
Man, did I crack open a Pandora's box there. And it's like the Mariners are just right there. It's kind of like the Blue Jays. And let's remember, it wasn't that long ago they beat the Blue Jays in the playoffs in the biggest meltdown in Blue Jays playoff history at Rogers Center. So I just find it odd that an expansion NHL team would have a logo, third, as you say, alternate logo, so almost identical to the local baseball team in town. But you don't need to comment on that. I just saw the Kraken come through here on the weekend, and I was like, whoa. It's like the Saskatchewan Kraken, man. It's like that S stands for Saskatchewan. Jaden Schwartz, Jordan Eberle, Chandler Stevenson. I don't need to tell you, Jessica Campbell, former Pats, Riker Evans, not Gary Mahura, Josh Mahura. That's his uncle. Oh, sorry, my former stats guy in the CFL. I almost feel like the home team for me. And then, so they won here, 2-1 in Sunrise Saturday, and then go up to Tampa and lose 4-1. How did you feel about the way the team played on the weekend? Is that symbolic of their whole season, up and down?
Goodness, yes, you hit the nail right on the head, Rod. It feels like it's one step forward, 2 steps back, and that's been kind of the whole area of frustration where with this team, has gone for this entire season. Because so far when you look at it in totality, you can go ahead and take a deep dive on Chandler Stevenson's contract, Montour's contract, how long it is, how valuable they may be, but the bottom line is they signed them here for the now. And for the most part, they have been terrific all season long. This roster's look great. But, you look at Florida in that game, it was so chaotic. It was the first game right back out of the break. The Panthers didn't have half the roster on ice for practice the day after the Four Nations face-off. The Kraken got there, trying to shake off rust for 3 days, but still, first game's first game. It felt like opening day. But in a game like that, it's where defending really stabilizes everything, and Joey Decord did just that. The Tampa Bay game was a different beast here to me because the Kraken already had one game to shake off their rust. Tampa Bay was in a similar situation as the Kraken were, Florida were 1 day ago, but you always think you've got to get one early or maybe even two while you still have Tampa Bay maybe trying to crawl right out of bed collectively with their game, because once period 3 hits, oh boy, hang on. And that's where we saw them finally wake up and really unleash everything they could on that Kraken team. So, frustrating because Alex Jessica in his NHL debut played so well, and I think maybe with a little bit more support, we're talking about a storybook night where he gets a win in his NHL debut after going through everything for about 10 years, from being drafted, going back to Europe, coming here as well, got a family. But he looked great. So, as of this point, Rod, with this playoff picture, the Kraken are out of mulligans, and they need to get wins now and get them quickly here. So this St. Louis game coming up is pretty big based on where they're at right now, being 9 points out.
Yeah, 9 points out of the playoff spot, as you mentioned. Game day, Kraken at St. Louis tonight. Let me ask you this. I feel like this team has been through so much. They made a coaching change already. But when they made the playoffs a couple of years ago and upset Colorado, was that like just overshooting themselves? Was that almost that they're a victim of their own success? Like, who are they? Was that a fluke? Or was that more symbolic of who they could be, the Seattle Kraken? They weren't a contender, but somebody to at least fear.
Well, it was a magical run, number one. That's what got them into the postseason. And, you had many players who, were shooting way above their means as far as a career average, and they came right back down to earth, or a little bit further down in season 3. And I think based on where this roster was at, the question is, how far do you have to push, and where does success mean to you? And that's been the ultimate question here heading into season 3 and season 4. So, I think it was a perfect storm for this team in season 2 and where they got, because they got a 40-goal season out of Jared McCann, who's been great and been consistent. He's had a bit of a down stretch last roughly, month, 2 months here, but generally you're going to get about 25 pushing 30 goals out of Jared McCann. He hit 40, though, for the first time in his career. Ellie Tolvanen, big numbers, fell back a little bit after a torrid run to begin, his first tenure about mid-season a couple of years ago. Oliver Bjorkstrand as well. You had Brandon Tanev healthy, but pushing big numbers on top of that. Matty Beniers, that was the ultimate thing for me. He looked fantastic in his first season, then took a step back in season 2 because he was still trying to figure out the league. And, we're seeing this in similar vein with Connor Bedard, Rod, where, you can get big numbers in your first season, but that second season means so much because at that point, the league has got you figured out, and it's your move to try to stay one step ahead. And Beniers found tough matchups all across the board last season, and even more so bleeding into this year. We're seeing a different Matty Beniers now than what we saw last season, and he's drawing tougher assignments as well, but he's handled them great. He shut down Alexander Barkov in that Florida game, just as an example here for you. But we're also seeing, I think, and this is for a different conversation, but a leadership element evolve out of him. That's big. But back to season 2, it tells me Beniers will be a big part of this team likely for years to come. When he's on and he's productive, this team will win. You got to have more help around him. But last season, we saw that take a step back. This team take a step back as well. You had fourth line production that didn't measure up to season 2. That also hurt because you had Donato out the door, Sprong out the door, Geeky out the door as well. So, in essence, before this team can build around an aircraft carrier, and I'll kind of wrap it up with this, they have to have depth scoring. They had it in season 2. They couldn't get it last year, and that's been the big difference in trying to build themselves back up to get that here in this 4th season. Part of many things that have been a big issue for this year, but that was the biggest key, was maximizing it out of that team last year, and they couldn't, unfortunately, measure up as far as what they had in season 2.
Gotcha. Well said. Well, you talk about the lack of scoring. Joey Decord was very good in goal, and that's what Saturday here. and that's what led to the 2-1 victory. Hey, couple things. I mentioned all the Sask products and the, I would assume, followers the Kraken have in Saskatchewan. Do you hear from them on your broadcast at all? They DMing you, tweeting at you or anything? Is there a following in Saskatchewan? Because you got so many. There's more Saskatchewan players on the Seattle Kraken than any other NHL team. I'm pretty.
Rod, why is it every time I mention Jaden Schwartz or Jessica Campbell or Chandler Stevenson, I get, hey, we want more SAS people, Rod. Is that you?
How about that?
Yeah, no, it's not, but it could be. We're very proud of our people. As you know, we're very proud of our people. And, hey, how close are you staying to the dub scene? Looks like you're staying fairly close. I was just looking at your Twitter bio. You doing some stuff with the dub?
Yeah, so I got about roughly 5-6 games a year I handle for a TV package for the WHL. It's on locally Fox, within the Seattle market, the CW out in Portland. Spokane's got a piece of this. I've only got one Chiefs game here on the schedule. So, I mean, it's nice. It keeps me fresh. It keeps the play-by-play chops fresh as well. So, it's a fun look to see who's come through, who's progressed. I had a great chance 2 years ago to call just that absolute unit that was a Seattle Thunderbird team that won it all, and they've got about roughly half their roster now playing in the NHL. A lot of my games have Seattle lined up. I've called already a game with Spokane, a game with Portland, and the Winterhawks are kind of retooling this as we've seen. They're getting a chance to see Spokane for one time already. Gave me a good look at Berkeley Keaken. They've got depth up and down the board, and they're going to be a problem coming up here in this postseason. So that's kind of the fun of it. I can't do every game. It has a Kraken conflict here, but for the 5 to 6 games I get, it's fun to get a firsthand look to see who's coming along swiftly here, to see who's ready here for that next step to take here all the way into the pros.
Well, that would certainly scratch the itch to do 5 or 6 games. But I'll leave you with this. I saw a stat the other day. Actually, I run a column on my website, rodpedersen.com, written by Glenn Erickson, that of the 6 highest drawing teams in the entire dub, the top 6 drawing teams, 4 are in the U.S. division. Why is it so popular amongst the people of the Pacific Northwest? You got a lot of sports out there, Mike, but they love their WHL hockey.
Well, that's a great question, and this was a great topic of conversation in the latter years I was in this league, and even in the first couple of years when you have folks who are curious about this and they ask. I mean, I can't speak for those who run the marketing departments for teams all across the board. All I can speak to is to my experience and to those I know as well inside the U.S. division. And those inside the U.S. division treat this just more than, hey, we got a game, show up, beginning at 7 o'clock, we're done at 7:30, and then you all go home and we're ready here for the next one. There's a serious attention to not just growing players as well, but to growing fans. It's a marketing tool. And so you look at how they can maximize that with corporate sales, how they can maximize that with marketing, on the interior, social media appearances as well. I think by the time I was done in Everett, we were roughly, I think, doing a community appearance at least one time a week, whether that might be at a school or more so where you can grow corporate dollars into a partnership. I'll give you one example here. The Silvertips, who play, I live about roughly 10 minutes away. They do a great promotion for dog races once a year, or actually, I should say 3 times a year on the ice. And it's sponsored by a local pet store. And they're a chain of roughly 3 to 4 around this entire area. They take the players out once they're done practice. It's 6, 7 o'clock. They can get out for about an hour in between. If players are still too young, if they're more younger, they have homework. If they're older, then they have more free time. But they put them in Silvertip jerseys. They head out to one of the stores. They promote this ahead of time. They get about roughly 100 fans, 200 fans out there, and they have dog races inside the pet store, and then take that right back in tournament style to the arena about a month later and have a championship race as well. It's no secret why a team like the Everett Silvertips have rebounded from COVID, and they're one of the highest drawing teams in this league. The Seattle Thunderbirds as well. The Spokane Chiefs draw great numbers, especially on a weekend where they have a similar marketing setup from what I have learned. But I got out of minor pros about roughly 10 years ago and into the WHL. And I'll tell you this, from what I got into at the Silver Tips, it was very, very close to an AHL or an ECHL operation with how they view themselves and how they view their business. You can't just view a hockey team as a band of 26 players roughly. You play and you go home. You view this as a marketing tool and an experience. And that's why so many teams in this US division are so good at it and they're so successful.
Well said, and I miss it. It's so great. You were a big part of it, Mike. Thanks for this. Go Kraken, and I just love listening to you, man. Keep up the great work.
You do great, Roddy. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thanks, pal. Keep in touch. Mike Benton, Seattle Kraken radio host on the Seattle Kraken audio network. With those trips down, I know we got to get to a break here, but do these names mean anything to you? They do to the fans of the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. Dean Scooter Vrooman, the longtime voice of the Portland Winterhawks, where they used to put him on the big screen in the middle of the game in a TV timeout. Hey, oh, hey, Scooter. You kind of had to be there to see it. Scooter. Westy and Spokane and Tri-City. How about the old Seattle Rock and Roll Arena where we were afraid for our personal safety every single game that we went in there as the visitors? Ah, the dub. We've got a sports update coming up and viewer takeover the rest of the way. Vintage Sasko wanting to recognize a very special anniversary today. We will. All of that when we come back. We're live on Game Plus TV, streaming live and podcasting wherever the best podcasts are found.